Welcome to this episode on the life of Geronimo, the renowned Apache warrior. Today, we'll delve into the compelling story of this iconic figure, tracing his journey from a young Apache boy to a feared war chief, and finally, to his surrender. Let's begin our exploration of Geronimo's remarkable life. Please forgive any mispronunciations in this video. Our tale begins in June 1829 in the rugged landscape of Nodoyan Canyon, Arizona. Here, a child was born into the Baden-Kobe band of Apache, a group that called the Gila River region home. This child, who would one day be known as Geronimo, entered the world in typical Apache fashion, carried on his mother's back in a cradleboard. As a youngster, Geronimo's life mirrored that of other Apache children. His mother, a keeper of tribal wisdom, shared with him the rich tapestry of Apache legends and instilled in him the importance of seeking guidance from the Great Spirit. As he grew, Geronimo took on increasingly important roles within his community. He learned to till the soil for winter crops and participated in the crucial harvest that would sustain the tribe through leaner times. One task that particularly captured young Geronimo's interest was the preparation of wild tobacco. He observed with keen anticipation as older boys enjoyed their first cigarettes, a privilege earned only after successfully hunting large game alone. Determined to reach this milestone, Geronimo secretly honed his tobacco rolling skills. The Apache lifestyle was marked by simplicity and adherence to tradition. Children like Geronimo often went without clothing, especially during the warm summer months. Women typically wore modest skirts, while men donned breechcloths and moccasins, adding shirts when the weather turned cold. Tragedy struck early in Geronimo's life with the passing of his father. The funeral followed time-honored Apache customs. The body was clothed in the finest garments, wrapped in the most prized blanket, and the deceased's favorite horse was led in the procession to the burial cave. Despite Geronimo's grandfather having been a revered chief of the Membrano tribe, his father did not inherit this position. Instead, leadership passed to a sub-chief named Mangus Colorado, as Geronimo's father had married into the Baden-Kobe tribe. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman, Alan. Please leave a like or comment. For further desert adventures, hit the subscribe button. At the age of 17, Geronimo achieved a significant milestone when he was welcomed into the Council of Warriors. This transition marked his entry into adulthood and granted him the right to participate in war parties. It also meant he could pursue marriage, and soon he set his sights on a young woman named Alope. Described as a beauty with captivating eyes and a graceful figure, Alope was highly sought after. Her father demanded a substantial bride price, more horses than Geronimo possessed. Undeterred, the young brave embarked on a mysterious journey, returning days later with more than enough horses to claim Alope as his wife. For a time, Geronimo's life followed a predictable pattern. However, the summer of 1858 brought a catastrophic turn of events. Under the leadership of Chief Mangus Colorado, the tribe ventured into Mexico, establishing a camp near a small town en route to Casas Grande. While the men engaged in trade in the town, a small contingent remained to guard the camp. On the fourth day of their stay, as the men were returning to camp in high spirits, they were met by a group of distraught women and children. The news they carried was devastating. Mexican cavalry had launched a surprise attack on the camp, resulting in numerous casualties, including Geronimo's mother, wife, and 3 children. The assailants had also made off with their horses, weapons, and provisions. This tragic event marked a turning point in Geronimo's life. Initially paralyzed by grief, he soon found himself consumed by an overwhelming desire for vengeance. As he gazed upon the lifeless bodies of his loved ones, a fierce hatred took root in his heart, and he swore to exact revenge on those responsible for this atrocity. Adhering to Apache tradition, Geronimo cremated the belongings of his wife, children, and mother. But the peaceful life he had known was now forever behind him. His vow of vengeance would come to define the remainder of his days. Approximately a year after the attack, Chief Mangus Colorado convened a council of warriors. With their arsenal and supplies replenished, he asked if they were prepared to wage war against the Mexicans. The response was unanimously enthusiastic. Geronimo was chosen to seek support from other tribes. In his impassioned plea, he declared, "I will lead the charge in battle. My family was slain there, and I too am prepared to die if necessary." 3 tribes answered Geronimo's call to arms, and soon they assembled along the Mexican border. They concealed their families in the mountains for protection as they readied themselves for combat. When Mexican forces approached, Geronimo was granted the honor of commanding the battle, given that he had endured the greatest loss. The ensuing conflict was brutal and intense. For 2 relentless hours the battle raged, with Geronimo at the forefront of the assault. When the dust settled, not a single Mexican soldier remained standing. In the aftermath of this bloody victory, Geronimo unleashed his legendary war cry, and in recognition of his leadership, he was elevated to the esteemed position of war chief among the Apaches. While many Apaches felt their thirst for revenge had been quenched after this battle, Geronimo remained unsatisfied. He persisted in his ruthless campaign against the Mexicans, often leading small bands of warriors in raids against villages and farms. However, these attacks were not exclusively directed at Mexican targets. When white settlers in Arizona Territory began to fall victim to these raids, the U.S. Army was drawn into the conflict. This ushered in a tumultuous period marked by skirmishes, negotiations, and broken treaties between the Apache and the U.S. government. A pivotal moment during this time was the treacherous murder of Chief Mangus Colorado. He had traveled to a U.S. military encampment near Pinos Altos, New Mexico, responding to an invitation to discuss peace. Instead, he was taken into custody and shot dead, with the soldiers falsely claiming he had attempted to escape. This act of betrayal further deepened Geronimo's mistrust and animosity towards the white invaders. For years, Geronimo and his band continued their guerrilla warfare against both American and Mexican forces. However, as time wore on, Geronimo began to realize the futility of his fight. The relentless pursuit by military forces, the dwindling numbers of his followers, and the increasing scarcity of safe havens all took their toll. It was at this juncture that an opportunity for peace presented itself. General Miles, a U.S. Army commander, extended an invitation to Geronimo's camp in Sonora, expressing a desire for dialogue. Though willing to listen, Geronimo remained wary. To allay his concerns, General Miles dispatched Lieutenant Charles B. Gatewood to confer with Geronimo. This choice proved significant. Gatewood was a familiar and respected figure among Geronimo and his band. He had previously served as the head man on their reservation, managing their affairs with an understanding of their customs and traditions. His ability to speak their language further enhanced the trust between them. Geronimo welcomed Gatewood warmly and attentively listened to Miles's message, which essentially called for surrender. When asked for his counsel, Gatewood advised Geronimo that surrendering would be his wisest course of action. However, the decision was far from simple. Geronimo and his band were reluctant to relinquish their ancestral lands to the encroaching settlers. But Gatewood had one more crucial piece of information that would prove decisive. He informed Geronimo that the majority of the Mimbreno and Chiricahua Indians, including many of Geronimo's relatives who had remained peacefully on the reservation near Fort Apache, had already been rounded up and relocated to Florida. This news dealt a severe blow to the war chief. After extensive deliberation with his band, Geronimo agreed to meet with General Miles, but with conditions. He insisted that Gatewood accompany them and that he and his men be allowed to retain their weapons. Gatewood acquiesced to these terms. The journey to the meeting place, Skeleton Canyon, took 11 days. Upon arrival, General Miles greeted Geronimo with promises of a brighter future. He stated, "Geronimo, if you accept this treaty, all will be well. I will provide you with a house, cattle, horses, and farming equipment. During the winter months, I will supply you with blankets and clothing to protect you from the cold." To symbolize the enduring nature of the agreement, a large stone was placed on a blanket before them. General Miles proclaimed, "This treaty shall last as long as it takes for this stone to turn to dust." He then cleared a patch of ground, declaring, "Your past actions shall be erased like this, and you will embark on a new life." With this accord, Geronimo's long-standing war came to an end. The once fierce warrior, who had instilled fear in the hearts of settlers and soldiers alike, silently nodded his assent. It was a poignant moment, signaling the conclusion of an era for both the Apache people and Geronimo himself. As we conclude this episode, it's worth reflecting on Geronimo's complex legacy. He was a man shaped by tragedy and driven by a thirst for vengeance, yet he was also a product of his culture and the tumultuous times in which he lived. His story is one of resilience, tactical brilliance, and ultimately, the recognition of changing realities. He was a husband and a father, a spiritual leader for his people, and ultimately a man who had to make difficult decisions for the survival of his band. His final surrender was not just a personal defeat, but a recognition of the changing world around him and the need to secure a future for his people, even if it meant the end of their traditional way of life. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Geronimo. We hope this episode of the Southwest Desert has provided insight into this complex historical figure and the turbulent times in which he lived. Please leave a like or comment. For further desert romps, hit the subscribe button. Happy trails!